Good morning and welcome to another BVI Finance Breakfast Forum. I am Elise Donovan for BVI Finance, and today we discuss cybersecurity. Are you safe? Over the last decade, we have seen the escalation globally of cyber threats, stolen data, ransomware, and a host of other issues related to our increasing use of technology. Some people say the only way to stay safe is to stay off the technology and keep your information locked in an ironclad filing cabinet behind a key. But that is not the answer. And today, in conjunction with the Information System Security Association, we start an educational series on cybersecurity. And joining us today to discuss cybersecurity, Are You Safe?, are two members of the Information System Security Association, Ms. Felice Swap and Mr. Ryan Gullock. I am going to review their bios and then we will have them open their mics and start the presentation. Thank you so much for joining us for this presentation on cybersecurity. As I said, it's the first in a series of educational and awareness events that we hope to do with the Information System Security Association. Felice Swap is the Group Chief Operating Officer of Harneys and traces her roots to Anegada. She joined Harneys in 2013 after multiple years in leadership positions with the technology industry in Silicon Valley and the nonprofit sector. After beginning her career with McKinsey, Felice holds a mechanical engineering bachelor's from MIT and a master's in management from the University of Oxford, which she attended as a Rhodes Scholar. Ryan Gullock is the managing director at BDO in the British Virgin Islands and also the leader of the firm's technology and advisory practice. He is also the current president of the Information System Security Association. He has an acute passion to create awareness about cyber risk and how everyone can help protect themselves from falling victim to a cyber attack. Rumor has it that he relies on his BlackBerry from time to time, and his mother swears that his first word was computer. Please welcome to the mics, Ryan Gullock and Felice Swap. I turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Elise, for that opening, and certainly welcome to everybody, which will hopefully be a very thrilling, entertaining, and thought-provoking.
Sorry, Ryan, it's unmuted.
I am unmuted. I thought I was muted. Ryan, there's two Ryans on here. I'm not sure who the other one is. You can hear me? You can hear me. Felice, you can hear me. You said, right?
I can hear you.
All right, there we go.
You're good to go.
All right. Thank you, everyone. It's never a dull moment when Zoom is in play for technology. And one of the thrilling things about being in the Information System Security Association is everybody sort of expects that everything will run flawlessly when it comes to technology. So anyway, we're hoping that this is going to be a thought-provoking series today and series over the next several months that the Information System Security Association is going to host on cybersecurity. So today we'll be looking at sort of boardroom, or from bites to boardroom, as we like to put, just looking at the connection between the boardroom and cybersecurity and cyber risk. So let me see if I can share my screen again. Let's make sure that this goes correctly, and if it does, then you should see my presentation. Felice, you see my presentation? All right, the thumbs up. There we go. All right. So a little bit before we get started, just a little bit about ourselves. Let's see. All right, let me see if I can advance slides. All right, there we go. All right, so who are we? Because most people may not necessarily know the Information System Security Association. Our main purpose, or our core purpose, is to promote a secure digital world, and that's not only from the business side, but also from the personal side as well, and the society side. So we try to spread information about protecting critical information, protecting infrastructure, and reducing the overall risk for cybersecurity. We are a nonprofit organization here in the British Virgin Islands, and we're also a branch of the Global Information System Security Association. As it says on the slide, our mission really is to be a respected forum for networking collaboration, also providing education knowledge, some of which we'll be doing today, and being a voice for information security that influences not only public opinion, but also government legislation, education, and technology as well. So we have an important role to play here in society and in the British Virgin Islands these days. So I will so the next slide is obviously this is ourselves. If you see somebody different on your screen than what you see on the video cameras, then you've been subject to a cyber attack. So as Elise said, I am Ryan Jalek. I'm managing director here at BDO, but also more importantly, I have a distinct passion on ensuring that we all protect ourselves and we all do our part to ensure that that we as persons do not fall victim to cybercrime, but also that our businesses don't as well. And Felice, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add from your bio. I didn't know you were a Rhodes Scholar, by the way.
I didn't know you called your mother computer, but you know, everyone has their terms of endearment. No, I mean, let's get into the soup of it, because there's so much in this topic to play through.
All right, so let me see here. All right, so when we look, whoops, whoa, see, already our first glitch. Going one screen back. Let me see if I can get do this way then. There we go. All right. So increasing speed, miniaturization and power of computing, as well as the connectivity of billions of devices, has led to a fundamental change in the cyber threat landscape in each and every organization. No organization is void of being subject to a cyber attack. We often hear within the cyber industry, we often hear that it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when an organization is subject to a cyber attack. And falling victim to a cyber attack doesn't necessarily mean that there's a breach. It just means that you'll be focused to some sort of a cyber attack at some point in time. The important point that we need to remember here is stopped. All right, I guess. There we go. All right. So the main or one of the main points that we have to remember is that regardless of whether you're a large organization or whether you're a small organization, you are subject, or you are at risk to cyber attacks. It's not just the Microsofts of the world and the Googles of the world and the Apples of the world that are subject to cyber attacks. It's also the small mom and pop store on the street corner. It's also the small trust company, the small law firms, and so on as well, that have to look at cyber risk from an organizational level. But the main areas that we need to remember is that when we talk about cyber risk, it has to start at the boardroom level. Not every organization has a CISO, which is a Certified Information Systems Officer, or an information or a CIO. within their organization to manage your cyber risk, but it has to start really up at the top from the boardroom level. We talk a lot about tone at the top, and that's where really focusing and attention on cyber is really important. It's not an IT issue. Cyber is not an IT issue, and you'll hear us say that throughout this presentation quite often, because that's one of these misnomers that people have when it comes to cyber, is like, oh, I'll throw this all down to my IT team or my third-party service provider to manage my IT environment, and then I'll be adequately protected. But that's not it at all these days. Cyber attacks are becoming a lot more sophisticated and a lot more stealth in the way that they operate. So as an organization, the first part that we have to talk about is really looking at it from an organizational level. So today we're going to look at just that. We're going to try to keep it as loose and open as possible. So if you do have questions as we go along to things that we say, if you do have comments, please feel free to leave them in the chat, and hopefully Felice and myself will see them, and we'll certainly try to respond to them as we go through. But we will have a time for question and answer at the end of this presentation as well. So without further ado, Elise, let's have some fun.
Now, the fun part about this particular slide for me is that if you look at the page, there's 2 times that we mention executive engagement on that particular slide, and it's going to trickle over into this next bit that we speak about here with the 1, 2, 3, 4 hexagons. The who's responsible bit. Do board members have to engage? Do heads of organizations who could not code if they tried have to engage? And the answer on that is absolutely yes. If you're thinking about life as a criminal, which I don't know if I really can think about, but let's pretend. If you think about life as a criminal, where are you going to attack? You're going to attack an easy target. What's easy? Well, of course, the big ones, the giant, whether it's Microsoft or whichever large firm you think you want to attack, those are great because the reward would be huge. Fantastic. And we see attacks happening on really large organizations all day. But you're also going to go where you think people aren't paying attention. And you're going to go where you think that they aren't paying attention, and they also have high value assets within their repertoire, within the business they do. And sadly, that relates to many of us, medium-sized firms, small-sized firms who have beneficial ownership, who have all sorts of bits of information. High value, seemingly easy targets makes us rather attractive, unfortunately, and that means that executive management has to be at the table very aggressively, very attentively through the cybersecurity question. Ryan, back to you.
Thanks, Elise, and that's an important point when we look at high value assets. Everybody always says, well, high value assets is equipment or something tangible. Well, high value assets in this day and age is data. Data is what they say. Data is the new gold, or data is the new oil, depending on which commodity we're looking at. But really, high value assets that you're trying to protect nowadays is protecting your data, and that's where it falls directly on the shoulders of board and executive leadership. And why we say executive leadership is because they're the persons who set the policy. They're the persons who set the tone throughout the organization. They're also the ones who are responsible for the overall risk management of the organization. So everything that revolves around decision making, and you can see that in this slide, sort of these are the areas that executive leadership need to consider, need to look at when it comes to managing cyber risk and making your business what we call more cyber resilient in this day and age. So obviously information technology is there up top, but you can see with the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, see, I can count too, 5 hexagons that we have there. Internal audit and risk management is important because it provides it provides key monitoring of your organization. When you look at internal audit, you're looking at evaluating your cyber services. You're looking at continuously monitoring and evaluating where you are as an organization. Legal and regulatory is where it's where we are at nowadays here in the BVI. I mean, we can't speak about financial services here in the BVI without speaking about obviously legal and regulatory matters. And nowadays, as everyone's certainly aware, as 2021 is the day and age of our Data Protection Act. So understanding what that means to your organization, and also what that means to protecting the data privacy of that data is vitally important from a board level. Governance, risk and controls is an area that you look at in terms of securing your IT infrastructure. It's about setting those policies and those controls around your organization. Of course, finance. Everything involves money, but also protecting your most valuable asset in your organization, which is money, to make sure that you're not only protecting it, but you're also spending it in the areas that it should be at. We'll talk further about this whole issue about is investing, or is cybersecurity a cost? Is cybersecurity investment, or is cybersecurity an insurance policy? But that all revolves around the concept of a cost-benefit analysis on how much risk are you willing to subject yourself to, and then what's the financial implications of that. And then finally, one thing that's becoming very relevant nowadays when we look at cyber is your whole overall supply chain. How are your vendors managing their cyber risk? When we look at ISO certifications and ISO standards nowadays, which are global standards on everything to do with governance within your organization, there's a lot of focus nowadays on only dealing with organizations which have a resilient cyber response, and do they have cyber policies, and are those cyber policies being actively monitored, actively put to the tested, and so on and so forth. So these are all areas within the board executive leadership that an organization has to take into consideration. Now, as we said before, small organizations, large organizations, it doesn't matter. It just means if you're a small organization, a lot of those responsibilities now fall squarely on only a few persons' shoulders. So it's up to you now to be able to manage that organization effectively.
Talk a little bit about supply chain for a moment, just to make sure that we're exploding it to the appropriate amount of care in everyone's minds. Obviously, people have read the news with different bits of software where the software provider themselves were hacked, and in turn that connected on through the chain to any of their customers, and their customers became vulnerable in an ongoing respect. But if we think about supply chain, it's all the places that your organization is going to touch and be touched. So it includes, perhaps if you've got outsourced cleaners coming into the office, that's part of the supply chain. Those people then become part of your security infrastructure, and understanding how well they are performing as members of the team really is important. How well are they educated to defend the overall organization? That's part of the supply chain. And then the other part, and I know Ryan twitches when I say this, but the other part is in terms of places that you have to put things. So portals where we have to put information, any other spots where we point out into the world. Some things point in, some things point out, but all of that relates to how we ultimately serve our clients. And there are vulnerabilities potentially in any of those spots. And so thinking holistically as a company, thinking holistically as leaders in financial services, we have to understand all the different elements. FSC security, our own security, our network security, our cleaner security, our AC technician security, all of that comes together in terms of our tolerance for risk. And Ryan said it earlier that we're all at risk. I mean, if the question is, are we safe? No one is. And so then the question of course becomes, how much risk is each of us, each of our organizations, how much risk are we willing to tolerate? How much can we absorb? And then how do we balance against that, perhaps with cyber risk policies, cyber insurance policies, or anything else? But it's always going to be this risk balance, risk cost benefit trade-off, because we cannot fully eliminate all the risk, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's the cost benefit analysis is I mean, I remember economics 101. That was the first thing that the professor says, is that he said at the end of this course, you will be thinking cost benefit no matter what you do. And it is very true when we're talking about cyber, is there is definitely a cost benefit analysis. You can go you can go Fort Knox on your organization and pretty much have completely minimize any chance of any sort of a breach, but that comes at a cost. But having a completely open organization, obviously that there's no cost to that, but there are a significant amount of risks involved. So
no revenue either, right?
Pardon me?
And no revenue either.
Yeah, exactly. Well, certainly not in the future, because nobody's going to want to deal with any organization who doesn't take cybersecurity seriously. And that is really a main point that we want to leave with everybody is that organizations want to do business with organizations. People want to do business with organizations who take their data seriously, who take their risks and concerns seriously. So that's why we're here as the ISSA to provide a little bit of guidance and a little bit of information about how you need to approach cyber risks. Because I mean, in the BVI, we look at risks when we look at beneficial ownership, we look at risks when we look at company management. So why shouldn't we be looking at risk when it comes to cyber? Unfortunately, cyber is one of these things of, like I said before, is like, oh, this is just an information technology responsibility. But in order to be a really resilient and a really sustainable organization now, it has to be pervasive throughout your organization. As Felice said, goes down right down from the cleaners right up to top management. Everybody has to be talking the same language. Everybody has to be concerned about cyber risks. So where does that leave us as an approach? So it really does involve a new approach to how you manage your cyber risk going forward. The first area that we always look at, because it's the first line of defense, we always say that your weakest link is your people. And that's why there's a lot of time and a lot of attention focused around security awareness within your organization. So, I mean, I really wish we could do a polling here, but we'll do it at some other time. But I would be interested to know within organizations, and you can certainly put it in your chat, as to how many organizations are doing security awareness training and security awareness testing, at least on a semi-annual basis. I know organizations, for at least you when we were chatting before, you said you guys do it every single month as a mandatory requirement, and a lot of organizations are going that way, just to keep it relevant and keep it in your psyche, in your mindset, and always the forefront of your mind, to do that security awareness. It's probably the most vital and most critical aspect, and probably the least expensive aspect, one where you can maximize that cost benefit analysis that we were speaking on before, because security awareness training doesn't cost that much to do, but most of the cyber attacks that happen nowadays target individuals. They target your emails, they target your phones, they target, we see WhatsApp messages nowadays, we see Facebook messages nowadays for requiring you to click on things, but it's getting your employees and your persons within your organizations to understand what the cyber risks are and how to quickly recognize them, so that you're not what we call click happy, and you're not just clicking on everything that somebody tells you to do, but thinking about what you're receiving first, and then gauging whether or not you feel that it's that there's a risk on clicking on a link or opening a file that's being sent to you. So it's always ensuring that your employees are cyber aware when it comes to managing that cyber risk, and that's like I said before, when you would, I think if we look at many of the global breaches, and I'm not only talking about ones that we've seen here in the BVI, but around the world, most of them trickle down to some sort of a phishing email or a malware attack or something like that, where it's been targeted individuals within an organization. So if you want to maximize your, like I said, your cost benefit, focus first and foremost on your people and create a security awareness framework within your organization, and create a culture of being I don't know the word I'm looking for necessarily, but being this sounds bad, but being woke. I don't know why that word comes to my mind right now, but it's being very awake to what's around you and what you're seeing in front of you, how to properly manage it. So security awareness is the first area of defense when we look at approaching a cyber landscape. The second area is through threat intelligence. This really means benefiting organizations by helping you uncover threat actors before they're able to take action. So that it's a continuous exercise, and we'll look at it more closely in a few slides, where we look at the things like penetration testing, where we look at testing of your organization when it comes to how vulnerable your organization is from we talked earlier about coding. How vulnerable is your code to changes within different programs? Installing a new program can create vulnerabilities, and it's important to test that before they actually become problematic in the future, or open your organization up to various attacks. So it's that continuous action of continuously being aware of what's around you, and trying to uncover things before they actually happen. And threat intelligence can be done via software nowadays. If your information is up in the cloud through either Amazon Web Services, through Azure, or other large cloud providers, they all provide threat intelligence services as a monitoring module. So it's something that we recommend, especially if you're holding any sensitive data, to turn on the threat intelligence and have a monitoring done in the background, which will red flag anything which looks suspicious. Felicia talked before about vendor risk management. That's now looking at each and every of your vendors. So it's not just your own business activities, but also what you're outsourcing. You might be outsourcing portals. You might be outsourcing your IT help desk support. We saw earlier, I think it was earlier this year, Kezia, which was a tool used by a lot of help desk support organizations to help manage all the tickets that were being raised, and that was subject to a cyber attack. So any organization which was using Kezia as a platform to monitor and manage their tickets was also subject to data leaks. So it's important for you to understand how your vendors are dealing with the risk management, cyber risk management. Because we are seeing a world that organizations are becoming smaller, organizations are becoming more nimble, because we're outsourcing so much more of our operations to third parties. So it's important for you as organizations to understand how those third parties are managing the cyber risk. Now, if you notice here, we're on the fourth, essentially on the fourth bubble here, and this is the first time we're talking about security architecture. What is the architecture of your own security within your own network architecture? So normally beforehand, probably 10, 15 years ago, architecture would have been your focus point as to where you're focusing your attention for cyber. Now it's falling further and further down, because there's a lot of policies and there's a lot of things that we look at as cyber professionals before we even look at the architecture within your own organization. So a lot of times we're at the practice of dividing our larger computer networks into smaller subnetworks. We're isolating hardware. We're isolating different parts of our network. So all of these are there to sort of protect various parts of the organization, but they're also there, which can create vulnerabilities as well. One important aspect, and something that we'll probably mention a few times in this presentation, is this whole concept of Internet of Things. And when you start adding in peripheral devices into your network, what does that mean from a security policy? What does that mean from a security architecture? Just adding in your Alexa devices to your network, they're great and they can save you a lot of time, but they can also be subject to a lot of vulnerabilities. We probably have all had conversations, and then all of a sudden, half an hour later, you see pop-ups appearing on your phones and on your computers about advertising for certain things that you might have just talked about a few hours ago or a few days ago. So there are devices that listen. There are devices that are helping us, but there are these devices can also create vulnerabilities in your security architecture. So it's important to understand when you add in these nice Wi-Fi light bulbs and Alexa devices and so on. What sort of vulnerabilities do they create in your own network? And then closing those networks down to not allow you to be able to add in those devices. So you don't want your employees to walk in and with their, like I said, with their Alexa devices, or even to turn on areas such as Cortana or so on, that can create vulnerabilities or security loopholes into your network. As this really goes into more about asset management and understanding who's connecting into your network. We all have Wi-Fi systems within our offices nowadays, but that also is important to then create a separate subnet, as we put, or segregate a guest Wi-Fi access. So when somebody walks into your office, that they're not connecting to your own office Wi-Fi, set up a guest Wi-Fi for them. So managing your assets, tracking user devices, so you can better understand who is connecting to your network, and monitoring that a person who are unauthorized to connect to your network or not connecting to your network. So again, that goes back to threat intelligence and continuously monitoring of your practice. Secure coding practices is an area when you become more sophisticated, and we are seeing a lot more what we call bespoke software being created. You're creating software specifically for your organization, or even just simply creating an API, which is an automated interface, an automatic programming interface that will have your programs in your office talk to other external programs, whether it be portals, whether it be things such as other organization or other software that you're either downloading or uploading data to. How secure are those, and how often is the code being looked at, and how often is the code being tested? So you have to have secure coding practice within your organization, so that when changes are being made, that you're not sort of creating or opening yourself up to vulnerabilities or cyber attacks. And then finally, we look at enhanced security solutions. So obviously nowadays, no network is secure, at least without some sort of multi-factor authentication. And that's at minimum what we recommend you putting into your networks, so that when you log into whether you log into web portals, whether you log in sometimes to your own network, there's a requirement nowadays to have what we call two-factor authentication. So not only a password, but also some other external device giving a code or clicking on an app on your phone or something like that. So you have some sort of an external device that's interacting with your network, or sorry, with your computer and with yourself, so that you're able to log in efficiently and effectively.
This is going to come into full relief in the next slide when we talk about some bits about what to do. But one thing to note is what's on here: token-based security. Ryan, you used threat actor earlier. There's APIs, there's all sorts of really fascinating bits of language that pop into the cybersecurity story that can make people feel that this is a world for someone else, that it's not, they don't need to understand it because it's some gobbledygook thing. I don't have a coding team, therefore I don't need to really get into this story. We need to be curious enough and interested enough to understand some of the terms. And once you dive in, they threat actor just becomes another way for saying bad guy. And you start to distill what actually is going on. But we have to be able to, at all levels of the organization and leadership and such, be able to understand what bits of this we need, and then therefore be able to apply it to the stuff that's coming up on that next slide about, okay, what do you do to deal with it? What do you do to manage? And how do we deal with when it's the humans that are involved in as our threats, as our vulnerabilities? Because ultimately we are the ultimate vulnerability for any organization, anything. And then when it's the machines, when it's about the actual systems and architecture, we cannot tech our way to a safe corporate environment. It's not possible. It has to be a combination of tech and people.
Yeah, no, I mean, that has to be, if there's one thing that we wanted you to take away from this presentation is that point right there. It's so important that cyber is not an IT issue. It's not a tech issue. It is very much a combination of a people issue and a technology issue. You can't have there probably would not be cyber attacks if it was just about computers. If computers ran the world and we didn't interact with computers, they would be fine. But unfortunately, when you install human elements into it, you have to look at policies. You have to look at that tone at the top that we were speaking on before.
There are movies about that robot world, though, Ryan, that we should be slightly concerned about.
We did have, I did have a conversation the other day about whether or not at some point in time robots will be able to program themselves, but let's not get into that right now. So we'll move on to now looking more at a comprehensive approach to managing cyber. So Elise, you were chomping at the bit to start on this slide. So let me hand over the reins over to you to start this one off. Now I'm handing the grenade over to you a little bit.
Oh, you're handing the grenade to me? Oh, how exciting. So ultimately for this, it's all about managing the level of risk. It's all about understanding where we want to be. You can plan, you can be prepared, and how do we ensure that our organizations operate in an appropriate way. First thing, you have to know what's coming to attack you. Identify the real risks, where we fit in, where the most important information sits, what our application structure looks like, who has access, who needs to have access. There's a world, perhaps it's a world in the past, in which one would think that it's important for everyone to know everything that's happening in the organization and everyone to have access to every single bit of information that's passing through. I think that ship may have sailed. There are all sorts of models for how to have segregated information for different points, different people, so that people can have what they need to do their jobs, but not what they need to be an increased risk to other parts of the business. That's part of that is about good business, really, and identifying the risks that we have, and then in turn, and understanding that allows us to protect the bits that matter. If we're able to protect them, and again, we will never be able to protect them wholly and solely, we will be able to build, I guess, a more resilient firm, build a more resilient organization, build a more resilient regulator in any part of the organization that's in this sector. Now, we've talked a bit about board level priorities, and you see that coming up as a list again under on the list under number 3, sustaining an enterprise-wide program. It's not just tech; it's about how that risk intersects with all the other bits of the business, including privacy. This isn't a privacy chat per se, but everyone here should be able to articulate GDPR and know what that stands for, and know what fines against for violating GDPR, et cetera, and other sort of privacy regulations, including our own, know what implications those might have for us as individual companies, and certainly for us as an overall sector. Defense for against personal information, as well as just defense for shared business information. Both of those are required and important, and have their own respective punitive elements, reputation elements, or even just fines. Yeah. I think, Ryan, your Riva showed us a couple of links this week about cyber calculators to, if you don't go down through this world, if you don't go down all the way through to the enterprise-wide program, and then all the way through to a proper response, understanding how your business is going to operate, then you can start to calculate the math of what will that actually cost an organization. It's either it's the cost to identify the issue once you've been attacked, it's the cost to remedy, it's the PR cost, it's the think of all the technicians that then have to come in and resecure your environment. It's the cost to get back up and running and regain client trust. There's stacks of them even before you get to punitive fines and all the rest of it for perhaps for having been breached in the first place if there was some sort of lack or improper preparation on the company side.
Yeah, I mean, the important part there is really about that trust element. Is how important that reputational element is to your business. And unfortunately, once trust is gone, it's very difficult to get that trust back, and that's why there's so much more focus is being put nowadays on protecting that data, and also the consideration of cyber insurance, because cyber insurance companies nowadays are not only insurance companies, but they also help you manage that response. So it is something that if you are holding a significant amount of personal data, if you haven't thought about cyber insurance before, it may be something to consider, because really the cost of any sort of a breach nowadays is, as Elise or as Felice put it, is not just maybe the cost of a cleanup or the cost of your network being down for a day. It's also the cost of everything else, the cost of your response, the cost of your the cost of the PR and so on and so forth. So it is important to look at how to plan that response.
Shall we click on?
Yeah, so a couple of other points to point back to. It is really about, regardless of the size of your business, you have to look at how to approach it, and it isn't a one size fits all. Every single business is going to sit down and approach, for instance, number one, a lot differently, because it says there, define the company's overall risk appetite. Well, what one company's risk appetite is going to be different from another company's risk appetite. So there isn't, unfortunately, going to be a one size fits all. But what is important is that there are international standards, and we'll look at those very shortly. There are international standards that you can follow in order to manage your processes and policies, so that you're not just reinventing the wheel every single time, because we know as smaller organizations, you might not have the resources to start creating policies from scratch, but there are certainly policies and procedures that are seen as a sort of industry standard when it looks at creating a framework around how you are managing your cyber risk. So it is that one last one. It's an evolving risk landscape. Cyber is not a static issue. It changes probably from the time that we started this presentation to the time right now. There's new threats, and there's new risks out there that we have to respond to. So it is really important that you continuously monitor that cyber landscape. You are continuously observing and understanding what affects your business. And what could affect your business, so that you can adequately respond to it. So, as Felice said,
you teased me the other day, and you were talking about whether cyber is a cost or an investment, and you started that off in this chat as well, like leading into that. It's something we all have to do and spend money on.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be the first thing that people cut when they're trying to figure out how to make their budget work for the following year. But when you throw in the extra story about, okay, is it a cost? Is it an investment in the future of the business? Absolutely, it's at minimum that. Or is spending money on cyber really just about insurance? It's about business defense and making sure that business can prevail if something happens, because something will happen. Unclear which one it falls into, Ryan. I don't know if you've had further thoughts on where that falls.
I'm an investment person. I mean, I look at that's me being an accountant. So I look at cyber as an investment. Spending money on protecting yourself is an investment into your future. It's an investment in your business's future. It's investment in your customer's future. So it has to be, because I look at it as a return on my investment. How is me spending money on cyber right now helping me make money in the future? And that's part of the strategy that I promote to clients. So how are we approaching cyber? It will help me gain clients. It will help me keep clients. So that's why I look at it as an investment. It's an investment in my future. It's just like education is an investment in your future. So with cyber, it allows you to make sure that you are going to be relevant there in the future. But Felice, how do you look at it? Because I know you seem to have a very distinct view on this.
I'm definitely in the investment camp, because it's absolutely not a cost, and it's not something that people should be cutting. And I think if we really look into our organizations, often we can find that we aren't spending enough on cyber. And by managing cyber risk, and that's all the things we've spoken about. That's everything from training to human development to vendor assessments, et cetera. It's all the bits. It's not only about the bits of kit. But there is a part of it which is, if we are to have a business, if we are to have an industry that continues successfully into the future, then that industry has to be one that's appropriately defended and switched on. And so, is the money we spend on cyber hedging our bets, so to speak? Absolutely. But can you only spend on it in the same way? Let's go with cars as an example. You can't buy vehicle insurance and then drive recklessly. That doesn't quite work. But it is part of how you get back on the road after some other person who can't drive, because obviously we are all going to be the best, but after some other person who can't drive hits us, then that insurance is part of how we get back on the road. And so perhaps cyber, spending against it, spending into it, investing in it, is part insurance, part investment. We need it. We need to spend, but we also need to be building and throwing those resources into the story now and next year and the year after that, unfortunately, until the end of time, so that we can continue to be successful as businesses.
Yeah, because I mean, as every business must get more technological, it must focus on technology to improve your efficiencies, to help you compete in the future world. But that does mean that you have to spend time, and as we said, time is money. So you have to spend money as well on ensuring that you're adequately protected. So if you want to make that direct investment or the best investment in the future business, focus on your cyber risk and responding to cyber risk, and don't, as Felice said, don't let that be the first area that you're going to cut, because you have to start cutting costs somewhere. It should be the last. If you have to cut costs at every single area, it's going to be the last area possible, one of these last ditch efforts. And if you do happen to cut something when it comes to technology or cyber approaches, cut something that doesn't involve increasing awareness, because that, as I said before, that's really you're going to get the best bang for the buck, as we say, on that. So it is really about focusing on what matters most to you as an organization, and that's a perfect segue into this slide. Looking at your key management principles, and those who work at registered agents probably recognize this approach, because it looks very similar to an approach you take into your business on looking at things such as AML, focusing on what matters most, how you measure and report, and how you're monitoring who your beneficial owners are of companies, and so on. So you do when it comes to when it comes to focusing on your cyber risk, aligning your organization's unique and business risk culture, and that word there of unique approach is there again, which is, as we said before, it's not a one size fits all. It's going to change from business to business because every business is unique. What works for small businesses doesn't work for large businesses, but what works for you doesn't necessarily work for your competitors. So you do have to know and understand and do that gut check on what matters to you most in your organization, and then start to manage that. Looking also at the premise with a principle to make cyber risk more tangible. And when you make it more tangible, it means that you're putting numbers up against it, because I love quantifying things, because that's where people start to understand what your response means. So quantifying cyber risk and ensure that appropriate metrics are being tackled and reported upon. You can understand and manage financial exposure to cyber risk. So that is an important point to look at on that is understanding that financial exposure, and you'll also be able to understand and prioritize. If you can quantify it, it helps you to more easily prioritize what's the most important to you. You have to be comprehensive, and that really means that you have to understand your business first and foremost, and understand the landscape in which you operate in, to be able to manage that cyber risk. So you have to be comprehensive and align your relevant industry frameworks. There are, as I said before, there are ISO standards, there are NIST standards that look at how to apply a cyber framework to your organization, so you don't have to invent the wheel, and you also don't have to apply every single part of a framework. When we talk about ISO 27001, which is your standard data protection framework, it is a very comprehensive framework to how to respond to information protection. But as a start, look at it, pick and choose what's most important to you as an organization that you feel that you can manage first, and then start ticking those things off. But there are frameworks out there, so you really don't have to reinvent the wheel on it. Allocating your risk appetite is what we talk about, making cyber risk relevant to your business and linking your organizational risks to your individual risks. And that really means that you have to look at your business strategy, and you have to look at your technology strategy, your IT strategy. And your IT strategy can't drive your business strategy. Your business strategy can't drive your IT strategy. They have to work in symbiosis with each other. And that is a mistake that a lot of companies make, is that they have their business strategy on one side, they have their IT strategy on another side, but neither strategy really talks to each other. So when they want to just focus on developing their business, they just focus on their business development strategy, and then they sort of forget the IT strategy and what impact that has. So you really do have to take into consideration where you want to go as an organization from a technological point of view when you talk about growing your business as well, or when you talk about protecting your business or saving your business. How does that impact what you spend or what you focus on from a cyber point of view? And that really goes down into integrating your business planning. So planning your business around investment decisions, around technology and around business assets, and make your technology part of your business assets and not something that's sort of there on the side. So Felice, is there anything else that I missed on that one?
Now let's just click on.
There we go. See, you just want to
covered it.
It covered it. So I don't know if there's any questions, as I said before, please feel free to raise them in the chats as well. There is 3 lines of defense that we look at, and in each of those lines of defense gets more expensive, but as you get to the top, they're more critical. So your first line of defense is obviously going to be your IT and your cybersecurity. So that's your network infrastructure, that's your policies and procedures, looking at each of your lines of business. and understanding what they are. But this is also where you set your tone at the top. It's kind of ironic because the peak of a pyramid is also at the top, and that's really where you have to set your tone of how you are managing and how you're responding to cyber risk. Your second line of defense is going to be your risk management policies and your risk management procedures. How are you complying with those policies? How are you complying with international policies? Felice had mentioned before about GDPR, and here in the BVI we also have the information, the Data Protection Act as well that you have to take into consideration, and all of those are elements of defense of how we're protecting our industry, because unfortunately when it comes to protecting our industry, is one breach too many. And we are unfortunately all guilty by association, and we see that when it comes to AML breaches, but we also see that when it comes to cyber breaches as well. So it's up to each organization to ensure that they're paying adequate attention to complying with international policies, international standards, and also complying with your own risk management framework. And that third line of defense, or that second line of defense, also includes how you're managing your cyber insurance, and who you're retaining, or how you're retaining legal counsel to help to protect yourself. And that third line of defense, which is that broad base at the bottom, your foundation is going to be what they call internal audit, but I like to look at it more as continuous monitoring, continuous improvement, continually looking at your environment, continuously understanding what is impacting your business and your organization, and then responding to that. So it's always being aware, always being woke to what's going on around you. I don't know why I like to throw that word woke in here, but it seems to work. It seems to work. So there on the side is all of those lines of defense. You have to incorporate talent management on there, and that's why sort of your talent management is sort of sitting on the side. Is it requires you to evaluate, and it requires you to grow skills within your organizations. Invest in people is what we always say in business. Investing in your people, and that's not just ensuring you're doing your security awareness training, but also are you training and developing persons in your organizations to manage your cyber response? Are you investing in jobs within your organizations which help you be proactive? Or are you developing outsourcing of some of that to other organizations? So that all goes between innovation and talent management.
And it's almost as if you can ask yourself whether or not a well-being program or an employee satisfaction survey, or frankly even just general management training, where does that sit? Is that an investment in cybersecurity? And I would say it is. If you have people who consider the defense and protection of the firm, or the industry, or the sector, or the organization, if people who consider that to be their highest and best effort, their highest and best use, if that's how they feel about the place, then they'll be better able to defend it. Mm-hmm. And so, could even be that happy hour is a cybersecurity expense. There are all sorts of ways to make that be true. Of course, you can't drink too much, because then people then start to say too many things. But having effective, passionate, committed staff who feel as if their futures are tied into the organization, that means you have a defense against, whether it's a cyber attack or fraud. All sorts of things you become more resilient against those if you're able to deliver that.
Yeah, I mean that's an important point. Is about what you're doing is you're building morale when you talk about wellness and so on. It's you're paying attention to your employees. Your employees want to feel as if you're paying attention to them, because a happy employee is a productive employee, but also a happy employee is a safe employee. An employee who is not happy is more apt to try to take down your business or sell your data or do whatever, because they don't necessarily feel that they are part of that business. They are not part of that family.
And in the current world, people don't have to go out to seek opportunities to sell out the organization. Those opportunities, unfortunately, come into their work email, come into their private email, see them on the street. Like, come to people in all sorts of ways through social media. And so we need all of us in the sector to be, feeling as if we're armed and ready to appropriately defend right at the tip of that pyramid on the first line of defense. It's all about people.
It is, and then those are your people as well who are looking around the business as well. Who's walking around? Do they recognize? Do they recognize a person's walking around the business? Because nowadays, when you do have third-party organizations, as you would just sort of mention, AC people or cleaners, or even a third-party security organization or something like that. Are they walking around your business, or do you just see somebody walking around your business who you don't recognize? And unfortunately, with growing businesses nowadays, you might not recognize everybody around the business. But being aware of who's there is more likely to happen when you've got aware and awake employees and happy employees. So invest in your employees, invest in morale in your employees, and they will treat you well from helping you reduce that cyber risk and help being part of that defense mechanism against cyber attacks. So on to the next slide, which is really looking at our call to action. And first and foremost, I mean, we can't stress it enough, is creating that annual cyber awareness campaign, at least annually. I recommend every 6 months. If you can afford it, if you're larger organizations, every month is even better. But it has to be, if you're not doing a cyber awareness campaign every month, at least when you are receiving, one thing we do in our organization, when we receive emails that are phishing campaigns or that look like phishing attacks, we will take a screenshot of them and send around a screenshot of those emails to everybody saying, be on the lookout for this. So you're creating a security culture of awareness about teaching people how to recognize a phishing email or some sort of another message. Just sending an email of something that you're seeing or you're hearing about is creating a culture of being more security aware, security conscious, security awake, or security woke within your organization. See, I'm just going to continue to throw that word in there, but it is creating and ensuring a workforce has an adequate cybersecurity awareness a campaign built into it, and creating a culture of effectively managing cyber awareness, because we can't stress it enough that those people are the they are the linchpin, or the cinder blocks that hold your cyber response together. There on your right hand side, there on the screen is of course technology. If you're going to respond to cyber risk, you are going to have to invest in technology. We haven't spoken a lot about technology today because so much of the focus is nowadays on policies and procedures, but it is still important that you have technology that is up to date. How up to date is your firewall? Have you updated the firmware in your firewall so that it can respond to the latest attacks? Do you have what we call more the future technology of artificial intelligence built into your hardware? It's not necessary, but so much more of the response is about technologies that can evolve over time, that essentially can recognize the pattern of attacks and so on. And I think one of our future webinars that we're going to be holding will look at some of these areas on how to have technology responding, or how you can have technology assisting you to respond to cyber attacks. Doing a comprehensive assessment, and it goes down to understanding and knowing your business. In the audit profession, we whenever we approach any audit, we always talk about understanding the business before you can approach and create a successful audit. Well, the same thing goes to responding to a successful cyber risk management process, is understanding your business, understanding your digital assets, your physical assets, understanding what your work environment is in your business environment, and performing those vulnerability assessments and penetration testing exercises. These are essentially just poking holes in in your organization's hardware, and seeing where you spring a leak, and then closing that leak up again. But it is a continuous exercise, and it isn't something that you just do once and you sort of let it go, but you have to continuously test. So cyber response has to be a continuous exercise. And there in the middle is all our policies, our processes, our programs, our cultures, in creating an assessment of where you are from a maturity point of view, understanding how technologically ready is your organization, what gaps do you have, and how are you going to respond to those gaps, and then prioritize responding to them so that you can move through that maturity roadmap.
Everything in italics on this page has a hyper professional delivery to it. You can go buy it for $1 kajillion, which is a scientific term, or there's pretty much many of the things on this page. Not a pen test, you can't buy that one you can't self-perform that if you don't have the skills. But there are ways to go out on just do a quick search for cybersecurity maturity assessments online. Yeah. Do a quick search for how safe is my company, and start to get into the perspectives of all the different questions you should be asking yourself. And you can self-perform that. There are a range of templates and possibilities out there, and then that will in turn guide how much should you spend, or which professionals do you need, or should you focus first on pen testing, or focus first on dealing with, I don't know, phishing campaigns within your firm or something like that.
Yeah, and that's a good. I mean, that is a good point, Felice. As a lot of these response mechanisms there are documents out there that can easily be purchased for next to nothing or for nothing, downloaded. So much of it on the internet is there to use for free, and then also follow us on Facebook. We often put new ways to look at some of these, and so we'll put some of this stuff on Facebook and help you, guide you to where you can go on it, because that is part of our mandate as the ISSA is improving the education within our business community, improving the education within our community as a whole. But there is a lot of stuff, there are a lot of information out there. So before you go spend your kajillion dollars, as Felice put, look at what's available to you first, and understand what it is you need, and understand what it is you want to do. So this next slide is that we'll sort of look at when it comes up. There we go. So organizations should assess their overall strategy, and again, a lot of this is sort of feeding into itself, but understanding your business goals, and then aligning your business goals with a framework. Business goals and IT goals and business goals, or business strategy and IT strategy should go hand in hand. They should be part of the same risk management framework. There should not be two different frameworks, because your IT assets, or your data, as I like to put it, is also your business and your operations information as well. So if we're looking at protecting your business data, we also are talking about technology as well. So they have to go hand in hand, and then responding to those emerging threats. So so now we sort of look at, and this is Felice's favorite slide ever, is how vulnerable is my organization test? So looking at how I think that we sort of named it at the beginning. How safe are you? I think was the title of this presentation. Well, this is your one slide to sort of start considering and looking at how safe are you? How safe is your organization? Or maybe the easy put is, how vulnerable are you? Because there are a lot of things that you're interacting with as an organization. They're on your right-hand side, or your web applications. What web applications are you, do you have, and are you using in your organization? Are you using a VPN? And what policies and procedures does that have when you're trying to remotely access your networks? Everybody nowadays, we're in a work from home craze nowadays, and everybody wants to be able to access your network regardless of whether you're sitting at home or sitting in the office. So you're accessing, you're setting up VPNs, but how safe is that VPN setup, or how do you is it encrypted? Are you protected with multi-factor authentication in order to access your network from outside, and so on and so forth? So understanding what you have on that VPN, building doing a configuration review. This is something that we haven't necessarily mentioned before, but it is really important to consider, especially when you're looking at your web applications, is who has access to what in your organization, and making sure that persons have access to only what they should have access to, and not giving everybody carte blanche access to everything in your network. Because when there is a cyber attack, and I said when, not if, but when there is a cyber attack in your organization, the wider that net is across your network that you have access to, the more widespread any sort of an attack would be, or any sort of a breach would be. So make sure that when persons have access to information, that they need to have access to it, and if they don't need to, don't give it to them. So that is really looking at reviewing your configuration, and then monitoring and detecting and so on. So Felice, what is it that drives you about this or vulnerability test?
I think it's because if you sometimes we can put our heads in all sorts of bits of sand and kind of pretend that if we don't test it, then we must be safe, mustn't we? And if we test it and we find out that, oh gee, there are 5 holes, does that make me more vulnerable or less vulnerable? Some people might think that identifying the holes makes them more vulnerable because people now know about them, but I assure you, pick a person who's actually got a black hat on and is trying to come and attack us. They already know which holes to go looking for, because we're not going to be unique in any of our organizations in terms of which holes we have. It's just a matter of, do we have all of them or only some? So sketchily taking a COVID parallel, it cannot be that if we don't test, we don't have COVID. On the parallel side over here, we are all vulnerable. We need to know how much so, in what areas, to what extent, where we think the highest priorities are, such that we can in turn do something about it. In fact, some of us in sitting on this call right now might already have active threat actors, to use that phrase again, already hanging out in some little part of our internal networks, and we just don't even know. So understanding how vulnerable we are, knowing what we can do about that, figuring out how we make our defenses more robust, and then in turn doing something about that, finding out when we've already been breached, how do we fix, how do we repair, and how do we restore ourselves to a level that's a bit more secure than we even were before. It is an active nonstop story, and this page actually, this is the game. We have to be doing it. We have to be doing the work.
Yeah, and doing real life simulations, or having somebody come in and do real life simulations to you, ensures that you're able to respond should attack happen, or that you know how to respond to it. But it is important to understand where your holes are before somebody else finds them. It's much easier for you to clean them up than have either a regulator come in, because the FSC and all the regulators are paying much more attention to the technology landscape nowadays than they were before. So it's important for you to understand where your vulnerabilities, where your threats are within your organizations, and then you clean them up, as opposed to having somebody else do it for you, or worst case scenario, somebody else penetrating your network, and then you having to clean that up later. So it's really important for you to understand how vulnerable your organization is, and sometimes you're using 20, your sort of hindsight is 2020, and you never want to be looking back and it's like, oh well, I wish I would have tested beforehand, because that's always or I wish I would have known this beforehand, because that's always the reaction you're going to get. Oh, I wish I would have done these small little things beforehand to help protect myself. And a lot of these are small things. Doing a penetration testing is not an expensive ordeal necessarily, but it is extremely important if you have a lot of externally facing applications that look not only within your organization, but also talk outside your organization. So understanding where your holes are and sort of plugging them before somebody else finds them.
And that's at company level, and that's frankly at sector level. If across the BVI, our whole sector, all the different players, if there is collateral damage if one of us goes down for one of these reasons. So it's important for us to understand how secure and how robust we all are, how we each are.
Yeah. And again, we can't stress the cybersecurity awareness program, understanding that it's something that impacts all employees, and that's all employees from, like we said, your cleaners to your receptionists, all the way up to the top management. Is the target audience for any attack is anybody and everybody. And to be honest, they're likely going to start at the most vulnerable, but also the persons who have the likely to have the most access to information. And a lot of times that is going to be management. So if there, I know there's a number of persons in management on this call or on this webinar. They are going to be targeting you, and they're going to be targeting you as well within your organization, because we have what we call I can't remember what the correct name is, but essentially where they're impersonating attacks. They're impersonating you as management in your business, saying, "Hey, can you send me this information? My email isn't working right now, so just send it to my Gmail account." And that Gmail account is actually some sort of a fake account or something like that that's been set up that just looks very similar to your Gmail account. So be aware of those sort of attacks within your organization. Do not send emails and do not send data outside of your normal means of communicating or sending information. So do not use Gmail because your email is not working to send information to somebody, saying, well, let me send it to my Gmail account and then I'll send it from my Gmail account to somebody else. There are a lot of secure mechanisms to use, and a lot of portals to be able to use. Understanding what content and what data privacy is in your organization and how to respond to it. Understanding what data you have in your organization is also critically important, especially when we look at GDPR. So having an effective awareness campaign looks like all of these, using all of these different formats, different media in order to create an effective awareness campaign. So it's not only just going to be somebody sitting in front of the room, it's also going to be either yourself or another organization testing how effective that campaign is by going in and doing real life simulations of phishing attacks or phishing emails or penetration testing and so on. So be aware. So that really ends this presentation. Hopefully, I don't know if there are questions. I'm going to unshare my screen because I cannot see anything right now with regards to the your questions. So do we have anything in the chat, Felice?
There's nothing in the chat. But
nothing in the chat. Have we done that good of a job that there is nothing in the chat?
There's nothing in the chat yet.
But, yes, there we go. Yeah.
I recognize. Thank you so much for this excellent and very informative presentation, Ryan and Felice. And the one thing I take away from this is how woke I am to how unwoke I am on this issue. And I think each one of the slides that you presented gives us an opportunity for a full day's presentation on each one of those slides and education and awareness, because there's so much risk, and everything that you have identified there, I know we are vulnerable and we at risk. The things that we do, the things that, just putting people on a Wi-Fi, sending the last thing you mentioned about sending emails to our private emails. And I do that all the time, because once something is not working, or it's taken a long time to go through to our people in London, then just say, send me it on my private email. And that's what we do to get around the security mechanisms that have been put in place to protect us. And we want them they work so well, but they prohibit us from getting information instantly as we want it. So then we go around the security mechanisms that have put in place to protect us.
But that, I mean, sorry, Elise, I just want to cut you off for that one, just because that is a really good point, and that's a really critical. Is that cybersecurity is not meant to be comfortable. Cybersecurity is meant to be there to protect the data. When clients are giving you data, they expect you to protect it. So cybersecurity is not there to be convenient and things like that. So I'm glad you raised that point, because it's something that people often complain about. It's like, oh, well, this makes my job so much more difficult, and this takes an extra 2 steps because I've got to put in another code to get access to something that I need to get access to 4 or 5 or 6 times a day. Well, there's a reason for that, is to protect your information. So we don't want to do what you've just said, people to just try to figure out a way to circumvent the systems, to get around it, to make it more convenient again. So I'm glad you raised that.
Sometimes it's a matter of time sensitivity, and we're trying to get this information. It's time sensitive, and we can't wait for the system to unblock the information or to filter the information. So we just send it. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's something we're really going to have to look into.
Well, hopefully your IT person is listening, and it can figure out something for that. So
it's that balance, isn't it? It is that thing about IT strategy going this way, because it absolutely is a world in which you can be too locked down.
Yeah.
And so there is the business need, management need, security need, and they will balance in some way. No way that they balance will ever be good enough. That's guaranteed. And so sometimes we'll tilt a little bit to business. Sometimes you'll tilt a little bit to being more technically secure. But in all instances, overall, the machine has to be able to work. It'll be uncomfortable, but it has to be able to deliver for business results.
Yeah. And you talked earlier in the conversation about, bringing Alexa and things like that into your system and having them exposed to your, IT system or your vulnerability. But I think the thing that we often miss, and you mentioned it as well, about having conversations and then things pop up coincidentally about the conversations that you were having. And just yesterday, I was having a conversation about security and how much emphasis we do not recognize that how much data is used from our phones. And then this morning, I get an article, how to make your iPhone and your iPad as private as possible. And I don't think that's a coincidence, because that's exactly the issue I was talking about. I said, we talk about other, Alexa and so forth, and how they're always listening, but our phones are also monitoring and listening in everything that we do as well. And so there's no coincidence that I get this article this morning on how to make your iPhone and iPad more private. So how we are always walking around with these devices. They're on us. Some people even sleep with them. I don't. But how do we protect ourselves against these devices, which are appendices to our bodies?
I think you think about what we're protecting ourselves from. So for example, things that call me a pessimist, but ships that have sailed. A whole ton of personal privacy bits about did I go to Amazon this week, or did I shop for an Instant Pot? That ship sailed. The moment you're logged in on your phone to Facebook is also syncing up or trying to. Apple says they're going to try to speak a bit more clearly about that, but they're already telling. It already knows what you're browsing for. It already is listening with Siri and Cortana and pick a thing. So the thoughts that are in your mind, the things you're expressing, the stuff that you're searching for online, is that something you can secure in the current world? No, that ship sailed. Now, your private business information, private government information, stuff that emails to clients, the latest summary of the XYZ results for a given quarter, the analysis of a particular bit of legislation that you want to dive into before you make that public, those are crown jewels. And that's the bit that it can be on your phone, but it needs to be on your phone in a cocoon, please. And there are all sorts of people all sorts of bits of companies that sell cocoons, basically, where you can operate in that world, and it's not something that for your Facebook app, which all of us are going to be logged into, except for Ryan, but all of us are going to be logged into. It's not something that your Facebook app can snoop across. It's I like to call them these. You build these little titanium walled cocoons, and none of them are fully titanium, but you build one, which is why when you go home, and our employees, all of us, we're all at home working, and we're all trying to pipe back into the office, even if it's just late at night. When we're at home, are we piping in through a little titanium cocoon? Are we going in there and then talking to the office? Or are we just out here in home Wi-Fi, the same Wi-Fi that has Alexa on it, listening? If we're out here, security problem. If we're at least pretending to type in to pipe into something, whether it's a VPN, some other form of thin client virtual machine type stuff, great. That's at least one form of defense. And so even though Alexa's listening, she can't really quite get into the stuff that you're typing inside your titanium cocoon.
And that's a whole nother conversation in terms of how to protect when you're working remotely. And I know you're going to have presentations on that going forward. We do have one question, and I encourage persons to put more questions in the chat, but we do have a question. We've recently had to deal with another stolen data. People are not calling it that. I'm calling it data theft. And how do we deal with the next data theft and attack on our jurisdiction?
Be woke. No, I mean the first. I think we talked about it a lot throughout this presentation. Is the first and foremost is having a proper security awareness campaign with your employees, and to change the culture within organizations to be more cyber conscious. And cyber first. So no matter what decision you're making, having a security awareness or a security first focus on your decision making. So I would, if I were to lay down, the first thing I would say is have a properly laid out security awareness campaign, and then have it continuously run. And it should not just be like I said, a once or twice a year campaign or presentation. It should be a combination of a number of things, and those things are going to be having somebody testing your organization with phishing emails or social engineering and so on. So that would be the first thing that I would say. Felice?
I fully agree with that. There's the prevention part of it, which is important. There's the be prepared part of it, which is important. So will there be another data theft? Absolutely. It's going to happen, whether it's from someone hacking in or from someone social engineering their way into us. There will be another one. Are we going to be sufficiently prepared to respond? And that preparation, I don't know if anyone else watches The First 48 about, after a murder, what do you do in the first 48 hours? Similar story. There will be another data theft. Will we be sufficiently ready to know what we're doing in the first 48? Will we know which company? If it's your company, will you know how? Will you already have the ability to interrogate the system to know if you're still a leak in there? Are they still inside? Will management, both at the sector level and management of the individual companies, already have a crisis response factored into that? Will we already have considered how we're going to fund the defense, both the investigation into our individual organizations, as well as the PR crisis response, as well as the client engagement? Be prepared, and so prevent it. Get our staff to understand. Get our whole sector to understand. Have, dare I say it, even as an industry person, have cyber readiness be part of what our regulatory requirements are for operation here, as RAs, as trust companies, et cetera, and then be ready to respond and respond quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this, and I know every trust company is going to groan, or every regulated person is going to groan, but I do think regulation has to be beefed up in order to make sure that all businesses are prepared.
Yes,
I don't believe we've done enough yet.
Yes, I've actually, we've had a conversation with the Financial Services Commission, and that is something that they are preparing to introduce as part of the regulatory requirements, because I think we have had it in our, as BVI Finance, we have had security vulnerability index as part of our part of our strategic plan, from, I guess 2 years ago, we put that in. But essentially, I think we have to do collaboratively with the ISSA, as well as I think the commission is going to introduce some requirements. I don't know what those requirements are going to look like from a regulatory perspective in terms of what the security mechanism should be in place for each one of the businesses that do operate in the jurisdiction. I don't see any additional questions, but one of the things you kept mentioning was that small or large businesses are at risk. It doesn't matter how you are, but we have a challenge, particularly within our network. We have small organizations, 2 or 3 less than 5 persons, and then we have large organizations such as the ones that you and Felice may come from. And you have the resources, you have the know-how, you have the monetary resources as well as the human resources, the IT resources to protect yourself. So what do smaller or medium firms do when they don't have those types of resources that you have at your disposal to protect themselves?
First thing I would say is they have to have passion, and that sounds cheesy, but it starts with creating a culture. You don't need to have resources necessarily to want to change and to want to protect. So that would be the first thing that I would say. And again, I'll beat a dead horse sort of thing, and throw out awareness training to your staff, because it is the easiest and the quickest win, is to make them aware of the threats and things like that, and then having understanding your business, and understanding what impacts and what affects your business, and understanding how your infrastructure works. And that really means what talks to the internet, and whether or not you use most of your applications internally, and therefore you can protect yourself with a firewall, or do you have a lot of applications that talk outside of the organization, and therefore having to close down and do a lot more work. So understanding your business, and understanding your IT infrastructure, and understanding and getting your staff to understand the risks is important.
Okay, we do have a couple questions in the chat. When is the organization security too much? How do we then balance our systems? And I think Felice covered some of this. How do we then balance our system so that staff who feel shackled by security protocols and find ways to circumvent are discouraged from doing so? Scare tactics, wokeness, what is the answer?
All the above. But the when is it too much? It's too much when the balance between that and business direction says it's too much. So too much for Ryan's organization may not be enough for your organization, Lise, and may be far too much for mine. Like, it's going to be context driven, and in collaboration with what that particular risk appetite looks like for that particular organization. When is it too much? It will always be too much once out of the year. twice out of the year, there's going to be a moment when it is too much, when it is that hypersensitive thing that has to happen in 5 minutes that doesn't quite work. Business risk, you got to deal. There are going to be moments when you just have to take an exception and go around your general parameters. But if those are becoming 20 times, then you no longer have a security program. They need to be really, really about exceptions.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Is once or twice in a year, once or twice in a lifetime is fine. Well, it might not be fine, but it might be acceptable. But if this is a continuous breach or a continuous way to get around it, then it's obviously then you have to relook at the whole process and the whole systems. But I mean, when is enough enough? It is really hard to say. I mean, that's really, it depends on every business.
Okay, we have a question about what are some of the other topics in the series that are going to be covered. We haven't set a timeline yet for the other topics in the series, but I'll let Ryan and Felice give us some of the other topics which will be covered, and I'm sure we've seen some of them. And like I said, you can go in depth on all the slides that you've presented so far.
I mean, one of the areas that we will be touching on is the whole response mechanism, how protecting yourself from a technology point of view, and some useful tips on that. We will be talking as well about from sort of an IT audit point of view, how do you approach and sort of an IT audit, or I guess looking at your policies and procedures and aligning them to your business. We haven't looked at every area, or we haven't looked at sort of how to put the series together. But if there's certain topics that you want to see covered, certainly let us know, and we'll be happy to cover them in future webinar series. We want this to be as effective for the industry as possible, so we're certainly open to as an organization to covering the topics that you want to hear about. But those are just some of the ones that we've sort of tossed around during some of our meetings and discussions, because we have some really skilled.
That we are actually over the clock, so I'm going to give you 1 minute each or 30 seconds each to wrap up and say your last words.
My last word is increase your awareness. Be woke. Felice?
That's 2 words, Ryan. You said earlier you could count. I'm getting suspicious. Yeah, be curious. Don't think that stuff is beyond you, and don't think it's someone else's problem. We all need to just jump in.
Yeah. So.
Okay. And we'll widely circulate this webinar, and we'll also put out a press release on it as well as an educational tool. We'll continue to educate you and put information out in this series. I want to thank the Information Systems Security Association for partnering with BVI Finance for this cybersecurity series. And for this first series, I want to thank the president of the ISA, Ryan Gullock, and Felice Swap from Harney's for an excellent and informative presentation. This has been another BVI Finance Breakfast Forum. Thank you all for joining us and for staying for this information, and do have a pleasant day.